We all have standards, right? And standards, the definition of standards is the quality or attainment of something. It's a simple definition. It's a simple word. And when I mean standards, when I say standards, we have the standards of people, places, and things, right? We have standards of who we're willing to date. We have standards of the cars that we want to drive. We have standards of the conditions that we're willing to live in. But it's extremely easy for us to become delusional with those standards. We're not always willing to look ourselves in the mirror and accept where we are. We're not willing to accept those delusions that we mask as our standards. So welcome back to another episode of Sweat Talk. My name is Chad. Now, I'm not here to tell anybody how to live. If you're new to the channel, the only thing that I do on this channel is I ask questions, and I'm not questioning you as a person, but I see things from a different perspective, and I want to offer a different perspective to everybody who's willing to watch or who's willing to listen, because I believe that the questions that we ask ourselves are far more important than we ever really think about. But I ask those questions because we have the answers. We have the answers to the majority of our questions. Now, there's things that we could do, like, go get a mentor or read books and watch YouTube videos that are going to help propel us further in the future faster, right? You can go pay a mentor to teach you how to start a business faster. You can go buy a book and read a book and get somebody's 10 years, 20, 30 years worth of knowledge in just a couple of hours. But when it comes to our life, when it comes to the way that we live and the standards that we have or the delusions that we have, we have the answers. We already know, and we don't realize how much we can actually learn from our own thoughts because we're not willing to ask ourselves the proper questions, or we just simply do not ask ourselves the proper questions. But I think that we don't ask ourselves the right questions because we don't want to admit the answers that we don't want to hear. But when somebody else asks those questions, then sometimes it makes us click in our mind and it makes us think, well, damn, I knew it all along, I just didn't want to admit it. And sometimes that's all it takes is the right person to ask the right question. That's why people hire a mentor. That's why people go to a therapist. They don't give advice. They ask questions, and they ask the proper questions to get you thinking, to answer your own questions. So whether we admit it or not, those standards that we have, they actually come from our surroundings. They come from a place of comfort. They come from a place of wanting to belong. The things that we have been taught over the course of our lives, that one thing is good and another thing is bad. We turn on the TV and we listen to the TV when it tells us that we have to have some standard of some high quality outcome. We think that we have to live in a certain size house. We want to believe that we are somehow above average, even though our actions say something different. The questions that we ask ourselves, we don't want to admit when we're being delusional. Because delusional is nothing more than a belief in something that is not reality. And then the thing about reality is we are the ones that create our reality. But the problem with that is our reality isn't where we start. Like we think that miraculously somehow somebody's going to come and sweep us off our feet and life is just suddenly miraculously going to be okay, even though we're not taking any action in any direction. So then we set these standards and we create this standard that actually is not reality. Think about going out and buying a brand new car. You can go buy a car that's going to be perfectly fine and treat you well for $2,500. But the problem is most people's standards won't allow them to do that. And we call that standards. So then what we end up doing is we drive ourselves further in debt because then we're going to go finance a $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 car because of our standards. And the reality is we're doing nothing but being delusional about that standard because it's not based in reality. We don't have to have that car. In fact, that car is detrimental because of the amount of money that we're paying every single month. If we just drove that $2,500 car for just a couple of years and put money aside to buy and pay cash for that nicer car, then we wouldn't be in a piss poor financial situation. So then we chalk that up as that is our standard. You know, we have the standard to drive this car that we can't afford, working at a job that we hate, living a life that we just want to escape. So then we go buy that big ass house that we don't need, that we can't hardly afford, and then we stack that mortgage on top of that car payment, or we stack the car payment on top of the mortgage, however you want to see it. And we think that because we live in this big fancy nice house that it's somehow going to bring us joy, and it's because of our standards, not our delusion. We think that somehow we're going to gain something awesome out of buying this big ass house that we can't afford. We think that for some reason living in a bigger house is better than a smaller house that's more affordable. We think that moving into that nicer apartment complex is somehow going to help us feel happier, when the reality is do you really need it? We set some crazy standard on the person that we're willing to date, or the type of person we're willing to date. Meanwhile, we end up being lonely our entire lives, and there's an epidemic of this going on because people claim that it's their standards. Realistically, it's nothing more than being delusional. You know, there's a saying that 80% of women are chasing 20% of men, and unfortunately it's true. But then 30% of those men, they're not going to get out there in the dating pool, and it's because they're being delusional as well. They think that it's okay to sit there in mom's basement. They're going to live the life of being single. They're going to live a life of loneliness because they're being delusional. They don't want to ask themselves that difficult question. And that difficult question that I'm talking about is, are these my standards, or am I being delusional? You know, because something that we don't think about is the fact that we can't give away what we don't have. So on its face, it sounds stupid, right? Obviously, if I don't have a car, I can't give it away. But do you ever think about, if you don't have love, you can't give that away either? Not easy anyway. You can't give away affection if you don't receive affection, right? Like, if you've never actually truly received, if you've never received true affection, if you've never received true love, how do you know what to give away? How do you know how to treat somebody? So it's difficult, you know. You need to learn how to give that, but a lot of people, especially in relationships nowadays, they're not actually bringing anything to the table. They just expect that somebody's going to miraculously land in their lap and sitting at home is okay, or they go out once a week and then they come home defeated and then they just give up. Then they don't take care of their hygiene, they don't take care of themselves. Then they don't educate themselves to better their financial situation or their career situation. And then we want to blame somebody else for our delusion. And it's all because we don't want to admit that we are where we are because of our own actions and our own doing. It's hard. If we're in a difficult place in our life, you don't want to accept the fact that it's your fault. You are where you are. It's easier to blame somebody else for our own piss poor situation. We don't want to look ourselves in the mirror and say, you know what? You are where you are because of your own actions, your own thinking, your own standards, or your own delusion. It's not easy. It's easy for us. It's a hell of a lot easier for us to point the blame at somebody else instead of looking ourselves in the mirror and accepting our situation for ourselves. And then we'll chalk it up as that's our standard. So, you know, I believe that before we can actually set our standards and before we can actually claim that we have standards, we have to be able to accept where we are. We have to be able to look ourselves in the mirror and say, you know what, you are where you are because of your decisions and your lack of accountability, or due to your accountability. Because there's a common thread amongst people. You know, the only people who will admit they are where they are is the people that are successful. The people that are not where they want to be, or the people that are not successful by their own definition, they're not willing to admit that they are where they are due to their own decisions and actions or lack thereof. You know, that's where that term self-made comes from, right? I'm self-made. We're all self-made. We all made the bed that we're laying in. We can blame all the billionaires in the world that we're broke because of them, when we're the ones that made the decision to go get that job. We're the ones that made the decision to go buy that car and finance it. We're the one that made the decision to get that credit card and finance the shit out of it. We're the one that's currently making the decision of not starting our own business or pursuing our own dreams. And we claim that as standards rather than delusion. So, I know what I have to give. I know what I have to offer. And I give and I offer everything that I possibly can. And the coolest part about that is I don't do it because of what I receive in return. I do it because it makes me feel good. It fills me up inside with fulfillment and joy. And to me, giving and giving back, that is my standard. And in return, I receive just about anything I want. But it's because my standard is giving, my standard is offering. Back when I was in the dating pool 26 years ago, before I met my wife, things were a lot different, right? We didn't seek the millionaire, like nobody really cared like what the other person did for a living. People didn't care what kind of an income or car you drove. I mean, it was nice, but it wasn't a deciding factor. It was what it was. We trusted that we were going to build something because of that. My generation, we were able to think long term. We didn't think I want it now or I have to have it now, whatever it is. But nowadays, we chase that instant gratification. We believe that we have to have everything now. We're not willing to build, these up and coming generations, they're not willing to build a life, a future, and a career with somebody. They're not willing to put their faith and trust in anybody. And all the social media and all the media in general, it just makes this more and more difficult. So then when it comes to the dating pool, the men blame women and women blame men, and then you have this misogyny and you have this feminism and the patriarchy, right? Meanwhile, they're just made up constructs, Don't get me wrong. I mean, the patriarchy did exist a long time ago, right? Women weren't allowed to vote, there's all kinds of trash. But that's not today's day and age. However, a lot of women want to use that as a cope or an excuse that they can't get ahead. Or they want to use that as an excuse so that they can blame somebody else for their personal delusions. But then men are the same way, they want to sit in mom's basement and play video games and not get off their ass and achieve anything. And then they want to blame women as being the problem. It's not a sex thing, it's not a gender thing, just like it's not a racial thing. It's an individual thing. It's the people. It's not the sex, gender. It's not the race. It's not the hatred or lack thereof or whatever the media wants to tell you. It's our own delusions and those difficult questions that we're not willing to ask ourselves that's holding us back. It's those standards that we tell ourselves that we have to have, even though we're not willing to look at it where we are. We're not willing to look ourselves in the mirror and accept where we're starting from. Because I don't think that we can ever get ahead in life. I don't think we can get ahead in the world or in the universe, whatever, without accepting our own reality and our own current situation. I don't think that we can ever move forward without first taking a hard look in the mirror and realizing where we're starting from. Because if you don't know where you're starting, how are you ever going to finish? How are you ever going to achieve the goals that you want to get to if you don't look at where you're at right now? I've said it before. If you tried to climb a mountain and you got halfway up and you tripped in the middle of that mountain, you're not going to start at the bottom again. You're going to dust yourself off, you're going to stand up, and you're going to keep climbing to the top. And life is the exact same way. We're in the same situation, only we make excuses for our situations. When we trip and fall down, we feel like we have to go back and start from the beginning again. And that's not the case. We don't. Us as people, we have the ability to just stand up, brush ourselves off, and get right back in the fight. Get right back in the climb. And start climbing that fucking mountain again. But it starts with accepting our own situation. It starts with accepting when we're being delusional or when we're setting our own standards. I believe that the words that we use and the questions that we ask are some of the most powerful things that we don't realize that we use or ask, or don't ask for that matter. I believe that we need to have true conversations with ourselves. We need to be positive about our situation, but we also have to look at the reality of our situation. And we have to admit to ourselves where we are starting. So then we can understand and we can begin to envision what our end goal is. We can begin to see what it is that we want and actually feel it. And then we'll eventually be able to give it as well. You know, that's why I think that touching our future it's just so powerful. Because once we feel it and once we understand it, then we can begin to give it as well. Because this goes for every aspect of life. It's not just like the things that we desire in life as far as monetary or comfort, you know, because we do have a level of comfort that we want to attain or that we want to maintain. And we should all be able to keep and harness that comfort, but we have to realize where we're starting from, and we have to understand that it takes time to build things. It takes time to build the life of our dreams. It takes time to look ourselves in the mirror and realize when we're being delusional and not. So I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but I'm getting rained on right now, so I gotta cut this short. So if you made it this far, do me a favor and go down in that comment section and write the word standards. Just that word standards. Understand, know, and maintain your standards. Maintain your level of comfort, but understand when you're being delusional at the same time. And understand the difference and the difference in the meaning of the words. So anyway, that's all I got for today, guys. I want to thank you guys for all those super thanks that you keep giving me. You guys are it truly means the world to me. I want to thank all you guys for showing up. I hope you guys are showing up for yourselves. I hope that each and every one of you has a wonderful day. Peace.